Touch the leg. Welcome everyone.
Hear me, do timba thike, ila cha se lo, muni mahamuna yeswa. Muni Mahamuna Yeso.
Welcome everyone. Touch the leg. Touch the leg. Welcome everyone. We will just wait for Tenzin Lakpala, who is going to be our translator. As soon as he joins, we will start the meeting. So thank you for your patience.
Tani so tam se sa chen ji la kong ba du ani chen chen li na cho chi zong di ci pa la cha se lo ni maham.
Touch the leg. Welcome. We will just wait for our translator Tenzin Lakpala to join. As soon as he joins, we will start the meeting. So thank you for your patience. And if you need to move around or something, just check whether your audio is muted, and your video also you can check. Thank you.
Yes. Muni Maha Yes.
Tashita Lake, welcome everyone. We will just wait for our translator to join. As soon as he joins, we will start the meeting soon. So thank you for your patience.
Vilat Ching Sawatapi Da So Kangde Ipi Sa Chok Su Ida Po Ha Tse Shi Wa Da Che Da Da Shi Elwer Zi Du Muni Mahamuna Yes. मेरे सेविंग अकाउंट में 4.5 लाख पड़े हैं।
एक बात बता, 2.5%
Kindly
रिटर्न ज्यादा
mute
होता है या
yourself,
8.5%?
ऑब्वियसली 8.5%।
participants, those who have not muted, please mute yourself. Thank you. Tashidalai Keshala.
Yeah.
Give me a moment. I don't see Tenzin Lakpala has still joined Gesala, right?
Yes, he's joining, but he's some technical issue.
Okay.
So, therefore, you can start this prayer.
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah. So, good afternoon, Tashida Lake. Happy Chökhor Düchen. Gisela, I'll share the introduction as well, right? So that we can save time,
Okay, yes.
right?
Right.
Yeah, okay. So, sorry. Happy Chökhor Düchen once again. For those who are new, I am Mrinalini, a volunteer with Jamtse Ling. On behalf of our center, I welcome all of you for the precious teaching on Four Noble Truths. History of a center. Jamtse Tibetan Buddhist Center was established by Geshe Lobsang Tenzin in 2018, located in the bustling city of Mumbai, India. The name Jamtse translates to the love and compassion of medicine Buddha, reflecting the center's mission to promote healing, compassion, and spiritual growth. Recognizing the therapeutic benefits of Buddhist practices like mindfulness, meditation, compassion, wisdom, and mind training, Geshe-la offers these teachings to help individuals achieve emotional healing and cultivate inner peace amidst the pressures of modern life. Jamtse Ling aims to provide not only a spiritual refuge but also a pathway to greater emotional well-being for all who seek it. For those who are new, I am sharing a brief about our teacher, Venerable Geshe Lobsang Tenzin. Geshe Lobsang Tenzin joined Seraje Monastic University in 1994, where he continued his studies in Buddhist philosophy. In 2016, he completed a Geshe Larampa degree, which is a PhD in Buddhist philosophy. Geshe-la also participated in certificate programs with Emory Tibet Science Initiative, Science Leadership and Science Meets Dharma program, where he studied Western philosophy, maths, biology, chemistry, physics, and neuroscience. In 2017, he went to Gyume Tantra College for 1 year to study Tantra. Geshe-la has been in Mumbai since June 2018, and Geshe-la teaches Buddhist philosophy, psychology, and meditation, etc. in Mumbai. About our translator, Tenzin Lakpala. Tenzin Lakpala has been helping our center for more than 1 year with the translation of the course happening online. For more information on the latest updates, do check our website www.milletjamse.com. We will share the link in the group very soon. Now, I request everyone to join me for prayers. Prayers on taking refuge and generating bodhicitta and 4 immeasurables. Please give me a moment to share my screen. Taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Now let us do the four immeasurables. 3 times. May all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. May all sentient beings not be separated from the bliss that is free of suffering. May all sentient beings live in equanimity, free from attachment and hatred towards those near and far. May all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. May all sentient beings not be separated from the bliss that is free of suffering. May all sentient beings live in equanimity, free from attachment and hatred towards those near and far. May all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. May all sentient beings not be separated from the bliss that is free of suffering. May all sentient beings live in equanimity, free from attachment and hatred towards those near and far. Thank you so much. Now I request Venerable Geshe Lobsang Tenzin to take over for the precious teaching on Four Noble Truths. Thank you.
강견 도제 예선에 따와 담제 범에서 담배 취네 된다. 오담된라 자제로 Thank everyone and happy Chökhor Düchen. Today is a very special and auspicious day. It commemorates the first training of the Wheel of Dharma by Buddha Shakyamuni. This is not only a festival, but also a precious opportunity for us to accumulate great merit. So therefore, we should begin by generating a pure motivation, such as compassion, bodhicitta, so forth. The things that we wish benefit all sentient beings. The amount of merit we accumulate depend depend great on our motivation. So let us cultivate genuine intention before engage any Dharma practice today. And for today's sessions, I'm going to talk in Tibetan. Tenzin Lakpala is here. Tenzin Lakpala is going to translate in English. This is more convenient for me also, everyone. Okay. 다 드린 만족에 다데 두 번째 안에 두 번째 시세라 당은 저거 되지들라 당은 안에 최세제데 다 지된 게 있잖아. 안에 저거 되지 유튜도 중림도 자자 좀 되대 당보 자베세제 되네 안에 마 페베디다 돈나라 페베 값어 아니 제가 내질서 동안 뭐지 쓰네 아니 자벽에 아니 제시를 잡아 찾아 와 레당나네 아니 셔 로트가 왔잖아 상제베 내조저라 다 된저데 아니 망고 쉬면 그거 제가 가잖아 만자게 따바제 천재 말에 정도 딘데 대바고네 아니 저것도 시에 따데 주로 되잖아 대바여 선다 골 당부때 어때 딘데도 제 중화대 장만에 다 찾아고 되는 텐서도 딘데 주나 삼스.
So today, the sixth day of the fourth day of the sixth lunar month, Tibetan lunar month, is commemorated as the Chökhor Düchen, And Geshe said that many of you already know the history of how Buddha took the path of enlightenment, and later he turned the wheel of Dharma. So, but still a small reminder of it. Buddha was a prince who, when he went for an excursion to the town, he met with incidents which sort of motivated him into looking into the suffering of the death, the aging, and the sickness. And this being the motivation led to his renunciation towards the world. And then that was the motivation that led him to walk on the path of enlightenment. And thus, after attaining enlightenment, he turned the wheel of Dharma. So Geshe said that most of you are already aware of most of the history of how this particular day, actually, or the turning of the wheel of Dharma came to be.
아니 대선다 다좀 되대 아니 누룩가와제는 공부하고 산제베 제라 아니 둔다 düng 제라 아니 단다 도제되네 아니 워르네스 사람 나타서 디파도 아니 공부 되는 페네 아니 워르네스라 아니 다페 되제 송전나데 아니 단다게 되제 채워 대선다 데 아니 둔다 düng라 아니 지당 자전화 상제 차례스 아니 최송로 제수되네 좀 되다게다 송제선 아마 식제 시송요라 어떤 내가 최저된 걸 여대에나 단대값서 네 대시하는 고청게 민도 스텝 내가 손다 내가지 뭐 신나질라네 코스부차네 쇼게해서 어디에 그 직조라 데마다 해서 봤어요 맞다 뒤다 되게 제일 안에 다 초고로 저저 걸려도 선하면 다 대출거대電子 초고로 써야 돼 안에 송
And so, after 6 years of practice, of hard practice, it is said that Buddha attained enlightenment in Bodh Gaya, after which he didn't expound any teaching. And for 7 weeks, though he was requested for teaching, he said, and the essence of the word that he said at that time is such. It says that I have attained this nectar-like teaching, but though I have attained it, there is no one who would understand the teaching of these, who would understand this teaching. So therefore, in the meanwhile, I shall sit in silence in the vicinity of the forest. And after 7 weeks, it is said that Buddha went towards the current place, the Saranath in Varanasi, and it is there that Buddha met with his suitable disciple and expounded the teaching of the Four Noble Truths.
그래서 다 되게 안에 두 번째시 됐은 거로 다 되게 안에 더줘야 돼 안에 다 드링으로 기도 당한데 다서 나다 진짜 더저기 잡아진데나 안에 완전 건데다 되게 추니시 제 중앙대 안에 항상 다 가와상 붙여고래 소소나 손나 랍쳐 붙이고 대전 건도 좀 생각도 안에 그런 넘버 답하고는 제와나 안에 손나 랍쳐 붙이사와나 안에 대좀면 말했어.
And so today marks the anniversary of the day when Buddha gave this teaching many of 1,000 years ago. And so this day becomes very auspicious because of the opportunity that we have to teach and listen to the teachings of Buddha. And so to do so, to participate in this particular action, one should begin or initiate with a clear and dedicated mind, to have a genuine intention.
그래서 나 내게 안에 되게 뒤잡아진다 좀 되다 안에 콜 어디 상볼라 안에電子 적어서送요라電子 적어送되잖아 다좀 되게電子 적어送되잖아 가서나다 진짜 템바시데 동아 안에 군중 고바 남비 템바송 시더라 다이나 좀 되게 당보대 안에 가르송서나 동아 템바송 된대게 타바다 안에 냥달라 속바다 안에 되지라 속바다 되게 가야송 뭐 당보대 안에 동아 템바송
And so on this day, Buddha, on this auspicious day, expounded the teaching of the Four Noble Truths to his 5 excellent students, five prime students, And the content of the Four Noble Truths starts from suffering, the source of suffering, the cessation, and the path, in which Buddha started the teaching of the Four Noble Truths with the introduction of suffering.
대선도 다 당보대 좀 되다 가서나 영화 안에 템바선 영화 템바데 시어서 하선데 근데 송을 다티 가르쳐네 당보대 안에 디지털서 받아 하다 하다 밀어서 보이 디지털 다가나 신게 안에 롱절서 주노 롱절서 보다 딘데게 안에 남샤라서 봐 하유라서 봐 딘데 가가서 뭐 때문에 당보대 안에 동아 시어서 저거래다 송 그다티 가르친 것은 딱 앉아 내 댕게 된도 코발에 내 대박 한 탐제라네 동아지 요르다스 동아 요와데 안데 하코르다스 어디 다 개점 붙여버 동아 하코르다스
So in his expounding of the Four Noble Truths, Buddha began by saying, "Understand the noble truth of suffering." He didn't begin with the joy, the pleasure, and the pleasantries of, say, the realm of the gods, or the other pleasantries and the materialistic things that could bring temporary joy. But he did start with the noble truth of the suffering, and this was done so for the purpose of understanding that everything in this existence begets suffering. And to understand that it does in this particular existence in the samsara, everything begets suffering. And to understand that very fact, Buddha started the teaching of the noble truth with the noble truth of suffering.
저다 동아데 안에 영어전 거래다 송전 저대 가서 오서나 지단게 동아 직 당한 저게 동아 시바샤르드네 동아 카르다가 사장 양사버지 시바쳐 버르다 송다 동아도 시바 주도들 양지단게 다 동아를 봐 동아 나와 직담지 봐 시네 근데 다 동아가 하고 송선 대 직고 담지 안에 매봤어네 되그래서 되고 말스 동아 차장 뭐 영속고 시네 뭐 시바도 담보 개체 버려 송 가서나 딱 앉아서 저도 수인아야 딱 앉아 이제 강아지 태운 거다 강아지 안에 강아지 여봐나 당보대 안에 강아지 안에 가래 봐대 응의지 제대 딱 해서 뭐 적었어 강아지 맛에 콜라 강아지 가래 봐 뭐지 거랬어 답배도 자자와이나 류지 강아도 류는 메데바 중앙이나 메데바 중앙 가서 따때 당보대 안에 야매다는 마셔 봐자 메데바 중고도 데 가르치는 중으로 가를 해서 메데바데 가를 해도서 당보 안에 뭐지죠 뭐지죠 해서도 다 대상 아주 찾잖아다 맹가여라 맹가를 들어 가서 MJ 당보대 안에 람상코나 디스기비도 저런데 샤저 당고에서 담을 쓰기비도 당보 딱자 먹고 싶어도 다자 림바 먹고 싶어 정말 딱자 제일 썩었다 차 딱자 제일 썩고 딱자 먹고 싶어 데 가르치는 지고서는 다 되게 나자데 가를 해도서 나자데 가르인 바데 뭐지 해서도 안에 딱자를 받침 치고라 내 난신게 하는 건 저야 동아대 가르도서 당보대 뭐지 뺏겨 줘 버려.
And so, as Buddha said, understand the suffering. One should understand that when Buddha said understand the suffering, he doesn't mean that merely understanding one aspect of suffering, but rather understanding the entirety of what suffering is. What are different types of suffering? What are the suffering that we face in our day-to-day life? Because in our day-to-day life, when we face a particular type of problem, the first step is to understand the nature of the problem. To thoroughly investigate and understand the nature of problem, then only can we implement steps to solve this particular problem. So, for instance, Geshe said that let's say that we have a certain type of ailment or sickness in our body. The first thing we do is that we go to the hospital and consult the doctor. And the moment when we consult the doctor won't say, okay, now you need to do this surgery, you need to do that surgery, you need to go through this treatment. But instead, what the doctor does is that he prescribes multiple examinations. And this particular examination is to enable the doctor to correctly identify or correctly diagnose what is the ailment or the sickness that the person is feeling. Then only can the doctor take steps to correct that particular ailment. So similarly, in our life, when we face different kind of suffering and problem, the first step is to understand the nature and the entirety of the suffering, and then take steps to solve that particular suffering.
단다 건도시원에 다 르기 강한 저거 내 나자도 좋아나 건도시원에 지가네 안지토네 봐 다젤라 소보네 마시노 전에다 내대 뭐좀 봐야나 신에 다 들어봐 멘저도 데나지 다 데나지 다 동아데 아니 나자데 가서나 르나자 적고요 말아 다나시 다 셈나자 뭐 보셔 된사 다 셈나자 뭐 요거든 셈나자데다 가르래도 다야 뭐지 저거 셈나자데 뭐지 맞아 봐야나 야 셈나자데 매워서 탑시에도 제가 그걸라 당보대 셈나자데 가래도 가샬라 셈나다야 데 지나간다 데 숙제 뭐 요때보다 가샬이야 데 셈나라다 데 가서래 스트레스라 동아 딘데 그 소바 나자 막 쇼저라 어떤저 정말 가래 임바데 양 뭐지 뭐 제거데 에 르르나시 셈레 다랑 치고
And so, as Geshe has given the illustration above, when one faces a particular problem in their body, they go to the hospital and the doctor diagnoses what ailment that they have, and then he implements steps to correct the particular ailment. Similarly, similarly, we also have mental ailments. It's not just physical ailments that we suffer from. We also suffer a great deal from mental ailment. We have many different type of ailment. So the first step is to determine what type of ailment is a particular person suffering from, what type of mental ailment that person is suffering from. For example, some people they suffer from anxiety. Some people they suffer from fear. Some people they suffer from stress. So, thus trying to pinpoint what is the cause of that ailment, to pinpoint what is the nature of that ailment, and then taking steps to solve that particular ailment is the way to encounter a particular problem.
this 다선다 안에 대가 나신 게 땅아도 지단게 지조진나라 내조지 누가 중앙이나 다대 동아라 누가 쓰더라 동아 나도 중앙 가서 남자 안에 내조 중앙 가서 다대 개 공개된 적에 다 내조대 가르래도 선도 참마 심죽전 나도도 수수도 역라서 그 간대 쪽도서 참마 십시 타버세네 아니 단다 상완래훈나 써보던 저 딱제전에 그 내조 엄마한테 담보되네 뭐 좀 봐세도 다가 나시가 안에 좀 되는 건데 르다 셈나로는 건줄 내조 말렉과 참 먹고 싶어서 내 전화 담보 뭐 전에 치고다 서다 담바 담보도 되는 소
And similarly, sometimes there are many major issues happening in the society, and these conflict and issues are also a part of suffering. So whenever a particular issue arises, the first thing one should do is try to understand what is the nature of the issue that has occurred, how has it occurred, what is the manner, how is the manner that it has occurred. And in our society, when certain major issue arises, we see that there are many different departments such as Department of Security and Internal Affairs. They tend to sort of like try to analyze the situation and see what has caused this particular issue, and then they try to determine the source of that particular issue. And then with that particular information, with those information, they tend to take steps in order to resolve those issues. And so, therefore, that is the reason why, while expounding the Four Noble Truths, Buddha started with the Noble Truth of suffering to say that here, this is the nature of the issue that you're having, the suffering. So, this is the Noble Truth of the suffering. Understand this in all aspect.
대수나 안에 좀 되겠다 아니 동아 담바 담보선도 전에 다처럼 줄 아니 동아 요래다 근데 동아도 저랑 그거요 말이야 나 저랑 줄 동아 요래스 되나 대송도 중국 아니 나 동아데 여바데 아니 뭐 제가 가서 동아 제작 같이 뭐 했는데 대매봐서 봐이나 되게 삼나 되고 말이야 동아 용서 시와 차고 송다 좀 되다 동아 용서 시와 차고 근데 동아 뭐 간다 뭐 차상하지 봐 용서 시와 차고 그랬어 어딘데지 송을 다 빼자잖아 저기 동아지 빼나 속보 나로 맞대베 동아 제보 중 따디 맹갈라도 아니 메사 어디대체는 동아도 매웠으나 땅아 동아 중에 매 삼도 대대와이나 아니 되게 말했어 봐이나 따디 동아 차장 시험 동아 형수 시험 말했어 동아 찍담지마도 제작 봐 아니 르지 동아 잠마도 시험어서나 대 찍고 매웠어 잡아이나 아니 간다 간담제 저 간다 주는 야 동아 시험 받으려면 그랬어 저도 동아 차장 뭐 시험을 송
And so, when Buddha expounded the Noble Truth of suffering, he didn't say just understand a single aspect of suffering. He said, understand the suffering in its all entirety, in all aspect. And then this is because there are many different manner and many different types of suffering. And if one feels that, for example, if one is suffering from a particular ailment, and if they take medication for that ailment, and after the course of treatment, they get better, and if they feel that now I have no suffering within myself, this is a very wrong conception, because after a while, a different type of suffering arises, a different manner of suffering arises. Therefore, Buddha said, understand the suffering in its own entirety, not only understanding in a single aspect or single manner, but understanding it in its entirety and in all its aspects and manner.
됐습니다. 다음은 저기 동아시아와 사수는 지단계다 동아시아도 전에 동아들라 아니 지단계 봐 카시아 제 동아 카시아가 아니 먼저 동아인 봐 뭐지 인터뷰다 카시 동아 카시아 먼저 동아인 봐 아니 뭐지 뭐 되게 내가 되는 지요스 자장가 파고 덴바시에서 선전에 딱 가서 동아 카시아지 동아에 내줄 동아인다냐 파베 강사게 아니 동아인 봐 뭐지 인터뷰라 딱 소세지고 담아봐 가서 저 된적에 때 동아인 봐라 아니 뭐지 체면도 되게 내가 되는 요레스 다 된저양 아니 동아인 봐 마시와나 대바르 된 대바이나 근데 저랑 동아를 용서 타르고 말했어 되나 다 됐어.
And so, therefore, as we see suffering, in suffering, there are many different manners of suffering. There are many different types of suffering. Some suffering are more apparent, so therefore we can identify them much easier. Some suffering are not that apparent, are more hidden, so it's more difficult to understand and comprehend those kind of suffering and identify those suffering. When we say the term, the Four Noble Truths, in one aspect, the noble term could also understand in such way that even in the suffering, there are some aspect of suffering that us who are not Arya beings, who are particularly normal people without great accumulation, we cannot identify those suffering. Some particular aspect of suffering, only the Arya beings are able to identify them and are apparent only to them and are very hidden to us. So therefore, even in this aspect, the noble truth of suffering can be understood as noble in an aspect that some of its aspect can only be understood by the Arya beings.
됐습니다. 당은 저기 동아 카시아 당은 저기 배나 칼라스나 초용을 써보다 기본용을 써보다 근데 써보 뭐지 아니 따되나 아니 내가 줘보지 뭐가 14부터 와는 동아용에 된대게 내다 된대야 카시아 요르스.
So one particular example is eating food. So when we look at the process of eating food, usually it satiates us, our hunger, and it gives us a sensation of joy or pleasure for the temporary moment. And in that time, it is not apparent that eating food can actually turn into a suffering. But eating food can and does sort of like changes or it transforms into suffering. But this is not very apparent to us.
당 저게 당왜 된투베게 동아데 가르쳐서나 근데 동아라 제단게 동아 기베 동아 차와도 동아 숨치와 나는 저거다 남자 전도 왜 된투베데 아니 동아때 아니 동아인 바라 왜 된투바다 동아데 동아인 바가 저 켈레트베지요 델레신베 동아게 기베 동아다 차와도 동아 세트도 다 레라와라 동아인 바 아니 저게 뭐제 체트베다 학바도 아니 미좀바제나 데 동아인 바바제
And so many of us, when we think about suffering, identification of suffering, out of the three types of suffering that we have, the suffering of change, and all pervasive suffering, it is the suffering of suffering that is the most apparent. And in many cases, when we try to relate with suffering, we usually only think about the suffering of suffering. But then the suffering of change and the all-pervasive suffering, these are the type of suffering which are slightly hidden and very hidden phenomena. And thus, these are less apparent to us. And these are more difficult for us to identify as suffering.
당안 저 동아지 동아서 봐나 다 대제 공도 시반는 생게 간저게 답변아 왜 제트비 배나 간저게 근데 소보라 나타바들들 중앙도 소보라 신기 근데 저거를 쏘고 고나를 쏘고 근데 나와이나 전저된 간저게 류지 동아데 동아지 동아 힘받은 간저 왜 제트고 당연히 저게 셈나라 배지 미적 시원한 셈받지와 중앙 오다데 동아래 삼상 근데도 이제 대저 렉전저 근데 간저게 아니 동아 동아지 동아 힘받는데 저도 동아 힘받 간저게 미디어마 수된 수이나 다든죠 아니 왜 제트고 동아 힘받
And so when we talk about, when we say suffering or suffering, usually we can, an illustration given by Geshe is usually the ailment of the body. We have ailment of, and the sickness of our body. For example, we may have pain in our abdomen, sometimes, or our stomach. We may have headache. So these kind of ailment or sickness or can be easily identified as suffering of suffering. And similarly, there are particular type of suffering that pertains to our mental health. So the sickness and ailment of the mind or mental health, these can also be easily identified as suffering of suffering. So these are examples of suffering of suffering. And by looking at these suffering, these are more apparent and easily identified type of suffering.
다 대제 다 등하데 안가정 그 봐. 딜레다 대제 등하는 거 전에 가봐더라. 아니 주베 등하서 지금 적시고. 다 주베 등하서 가르쳐 오잖아. 딱 한테 사자가 쳐봤 대바죠라. 사자가 쳐봤 대바서 오다 먼저. 배제나라잖아. 다대 꼭 하고나 지단계 아니 따 대회나 아니 대바인 버터세. 대 14번 땡다와이나 그 등하지 한신이다. 배자전 대제 공도 주변에 지금 칼라사와이나 저 첨부 영화나 딱 신부 15층 쌤나라 대바트 레벨. 대바트 따서나 아니 대바트 통고. 딱 칼라데 사다 최매워 사다. 남산데 동안에 나나 저쪽 나용 속장도 되는 오다 동아잼 당안에 이제 땅 앞에 차와첨보 농바젤라 대대와이나 형 차와연나 딱 당로지나라 봐 SE 저 강바지나 대대와나 트랜스시 제가 기부 쇼용 거 대바질라면 다 대바데 못에네 대나나 저쪽 가셔야 되는 야데 파 존이야 차네 차베 동아용 거 대다 텔레서 거 동아 가셔 대바 가셔 사제 대바 가셔 근데 내가 갑자기 대변 오인 받아 될라 근데 동아랑 신 받는데 요래 된줄 안에 죄베 동아서
And so the suffering of suffering is more apparent and easier to identify. But the one that is a little slightly more difficult to identify is the suffering of change. These are the feeling of pleasure that arises from affliction. So these are afflictive emotion that disguises as pleasure. And because of the temporary pleasure, we are unable to identify most of these as actual suffering. For example, let's say the pleasure of eating delicious food. When we tend to eat delicious food, the moment when we eat delicious food, because of the taste and everything, we feel a temporary sense of pleasure, which we identify as happiness. But what happens if we eat too much? When we eat too much, what happens is that we tend to suffer from stomach ache. So we see that that very action, that afflictive pleasure, has transformed itself into its true nature, that is the suffering. Similarly, when we are living in, let's say, a more sort of like a more hot temperature zone, a place where the temperatures are high, sitting in a room that has air conditioning, it gives us pleasure temporarily. We feel that we have relief from that heat, and then for a while it feels like pleasure. But then if we stay in that particular room for hours and hours, what happens is that we start to feel cold and we feel chills. So therefore, we see that that particular experience of feeling pleasure, temporary pleasure from the air conditioning, has converted or transformed itself into its true nature, which is the suffering. So therefore, this kind of temporary pleasure, afflictive pleasure, disguised as happiness, which transform into suffering, is considered or defined as suffering of change.
당안에 저기 당한 저기 기베 동아 망보를 배차잖아. 다 영화 참자는 건 저기 이제 토로되는 땅 빠뜨리는 땅 기보던 자 장라나 서버던 기오 쇼용으로 다 장라도 처음에 동아에는 야 소번 내가 차로다. 나도 전에 동아 조용도. 당안에 저기 다 이제 토로를 서버 근데 저 쇼다 바시야 답쇼 저 대표로 야 잠자라 나저 된다 라네야 맞지버서 야 대표로 축바 쇼를 쏘고 나좀 먹어 쇼 용거 다 윤대전에 대저 가서나 대응 엄마데 김나로 여름마다 따나 김나 여름마다 대응 엄마데 다 된저야 아니 동안 그런 식으로 진짜 동안을 봐 조초초 대대로서
And so there are there are many examples of suffering of change. One particular example is, for example, when we sort of host parties, and then there are many people gathering. We feel that everyone is having a good time, and then some people they are consuming alcohol. And then initially, consumption of alcohol and the particular environment tends to create that sensation where we feel that everyone is having good time, everyone is happy, they're enjoying. But then consumption of alcohol for a long time, it causes different ailments. It causes different problem in our body. So therefore, we see that consumption of alcohol, though in the temporary frame of time, it tends to give a temporary pleasure, but in the long run, it causes suffering. Similarly, let's say that everyone is having a good time at the party, but then suddenly there is a confrontation, there's an argument, there's an issue that happens there, which sort of turns the entire environment into a more tense situation. So we see that even though these type of scenario, they may appear to be a scenario where everyone is having a good time, it may appear that everyone is experiencing happiness, but in reality, it is by itself the nature of suffering and a source of suffering. So these type of illustrations are illustrations of suffering of change.
다 이나 다 미제도 다 소소 지도는 대고도 되느냐 참자나 뺐다 톡톡다 된들 도가 준 거다 네 지도를 되는 도가라 맞게 볼라 뺐죠 대행서 연구 말다데 네 지도를 되는 도가 이나야 대가서 소소 거네게 템바다 시신을 도 되네 따다지 렘보치 속불라 만내봐 아니 촉발 지도를 가리나 만내봐 제조라 소소 거네 삽사체는 도샤와네 약버렸어
Even so, living in a society or in a community, it's unavoidable that sometimes we need to attend particular events of such a nature. And when we do so, because we cannot simply isolate ourselves altogether from the society. And therefore, because of that particular reason, it is unavoidable that sometimes we need to attend these particular type of events. And when we do so, when we do attend this particular type of events, it depends entirely on our moral judgment or our ability to judge a situation and be able to conduct ourselves in a proper way, so that even if we are participating in such event, this particular event does not turn into great suffering. So therefore, we should use our wisdom and our ability to judge a particular situation to stray from situations that might cause unnecessary suffering.
이제 다 되는 되네 다 되네 디젤에 카와 다 동아인 병을 카바데 가르쳐서나 아니 차와 되게 동아서지 다 데이터에는 바제 망고 저기 동아에서 받는 바제 나가 정말 가보셔요 배차자는 건저게 속보도 같은데요 동아에서 다 메젤 라바나 소저게 파마데 보고들 라바나 파마데 동아에서 왔다 아니 보데 파마들 라는 보고데 동아에서 왔다 속보다 저가 되면 봐도 직직 동아에 라바나 준에 캘링 가고 싶었다데 가서는 건조에 통해야 되는데 양당 봐지 이동 좀 뭐도 이 동아에 넘어서 동아서는 가서 쌤남 동아서는 누가 더 좋고 그러 대선에 된저에 대한 동아에 봐지 캘린데 가고 싶어 그래서 다 된저에 동아데 타와 되게 동아서 봐데 근데 사제니 레다 녀모왕 중국에 근데 최대라네 타와 되게 동아서 되게 시절 여방한테 가자 받은 거 내봐데 먼저 레기 동아다 쌤지 동아데 영역 알았어 진이게 아니 동아 당번 얘기 아니 거기 시세도 없어도 없어.
And so the most hidden or the most complex out of these three types of suffering is the all-pervasive suffering. And so when someone tells you that a particular thing that comes under the all-pervasive suffering is a suffering, it is a thing that's really difficult for us to digest or for us to accept. For example, under the context of all pervasive suffering, the very body that we cherish, this itself is suffering. the family members that we have, all of them are suffering. The people who are dear to us, near to us, every one of them are suffering. Our parents, our children, a child to a parent to a child, everything is suffering. So therefore, when we talk about the all-pervasive suffering, it is suffering that is pervasive to everything. And it is the cause of us taking rebirth in the samsaric cycle. This is the cause of the suffering to the body and the mind. And as long as we are unable to understand this particular suffering, we won't be able to liberate from the suffering of the body and the suffering of the mind. And this suffering, which is the all-pervasive suffering, is also the cause of the two suffering that we discussed earlier, the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change.
이제 다 동아대 지단 게 먼저 하고 그랬는데 동아 셔도 되나 맞죠 싶어요. 먼저 동아 유요 그랬어. 가시아는 동아대 거를 셔 봐야나야 맞죠 셔 선물을 쓰도. 다 대체고 주네요. 말 가서는 소소 줄래 돼요 되버라. 소소 줄래 여가대 소소 뭐지 제거도 뺏게 좀 붙여. 소소 줄래 여나 소소 뭐지 맞아 봐야나 대 소소 소소를 강가대 붙여 집어쳐 버려. 배차잖아 매직 안에 배다 소소게 돼. 암저 시라 골라먹고 되나 여세 봐라. 암저 그거면 랍샤는 가면 암저 그 먹어나 고유 더더 전에 아니 메이크에 항상 되다 소소야디 컨트롤 라인 주차도라 어디다 텔라 속버지 가라 임바데 칸네 차잖아 되게 강하서 가요 말스.
And so usually when we sort of discuss these topics such as suffering with other people, people tend to look at this particular topic in a more negative view. They tend to take great sorrow when we talk about these different type of suffering. But in reality, there is nothing to feel sorrow about. It is a thing that is inevitable. It is the nature of the cycle. And then to accept this nature of the cycle gives us a great deal of liberation. To be held by the fear of this particular concept, to be liberated from that particular trap. So, therefore, for example, if someone has difficulty hearing, if let's say someone has a difficulty in hearing, it's much better if they tell the other person, I'm not able to hear very well, or I have a weaker capacity to hear. And if one tells this truth to the other person, that person will talk louder. And by the virtue of talking louder, the person who has the weaker capacity to hear, they can hear the thing much clearly. Instead of asking something again and again and trying to hide the fact that they cannot hear very well. So it's better to accept the fact that they cannot hear very well and to tell the person that they cannot hear very well. And by this, they can avoid the unnecessary trouble that it could cause. So similarly, it is better to accept the fact that there is suffering and all of us suffer by existing in the cycle, rather than trying to avoid this topic and yet to suffer without knowing why we do so.
됐습니다. 당한 저게 다 동아 세바데 좀데 ngüzi 쳐버. 동아 ngü지는 다 리그레스네 되고 말았어. 동아 ngü지면 삼관 ngü지는 동아 숨 차상 거 쳐버. ngü지는 전에 다 대담지 되거라서인데 되고 말인데 좀 되다가 안에 동아들 조요메 딱 됐지. 조요메. 근데 조요다 메스. 조요나 조대야 안에 가르레도스. 양 ngü지전. 조대야 매바 소토고 되면도스. 딱 봐줘야 되는데 조대 안에 레드 녀모 받아서 근데 동아기 조례 시작해서 ngü지 쳐도 전에 대반이 받다. 군중 세대
And so, when Buddha said, understand thoroughly the noble truth of suffering, Buddha didn't left it there. He didn't simply say, understand the suffering and left it there. What he did is that after that he says, analyze the suffering. Try to understand what is the cause of these suffering. How are these suffering generating? And so therefore Buddha taught or expounded the teaching of the noble truth of the source of suffering, that origin of suffering, to understand that all suffering arises from cause. And the cause of all the suffering is the chain of the karma and the affliction and the ignorance. Because of the afflictive ignorance and the chain of karma because of the afflictive ignorance and chain of karma, the suffering arises. So therefore, Buddha said, not only to understand the suffering thoroughly, as we understood it in the 3 types of suffering, but now to analyze and understand what is the source, what is the origin of the suffering, and thus the noble truth of the origin of suffering.
사실은 다 둥아 매워서나 둥아게 잡아대 매워서 고서래 다대 등장 안 저기 다 세고 쇼래 다 지당 남자 준동 가서 다 대진 완전 공도 휴변에 MZ 된 적이야 당보된데 나자된 거에 된데 나자 거에 된 배제라 나자 되니 매워서에게 답시된 것도 나자 매워서라 나자 중국도 쌓이 물어 나 중국 나자 되는데 중시하다 저나 중국 갈라 되는데 누구도나 갈라 돼서 함샤고 그랬어 델라 소바네 칠로게 쇼제 가다 가래나 디네 전에 대중고도나 대전에 제주요 말했으더니 대전에 치주로 중고대만 매워서 그랬어. 동안 어제 맞아도 동안도 매워서 중고대 매워서 자와나 란신게 동안 매워서 알았어. 그래서 델라 소바 강아 간다 가래나야 땅안 저기 강아되게 중고대 자고 뺏겠죠 뭐. 중고 자네 중고대 매워서 또 됩니다. 다 매워서 또 그러면 용 땅고도 간다나 어디 제대로는 안데 대 아니 간 저기 남자 준도야 네 저기 매제 나올라게 자대 자주다 내가 쉬어요. 가르데 강아 가르데 가래나야 그 매워서 와라 되게 잡아도 매워서 거. 자 신동제나 잡았던데 상막에 얘가 상막 감려다. 어디네 저랬어.
And so, to eradicate this suffering, one should understand the source of the suffering, and by the eradication of the source of suffering or the origin of suffering, one is able to identify and eradicate that source, and with that, one is able to eradicate the suffering altogether. For instance, if someone is suffering from a particular ailment, the doctor will initially diagnose the ailment. And by diagnosing the ailment, the doctor will look into the source of that ailment. And by identifying that the source of ailment, for instance, if the cause of this particular ailment is something that they were eating, or if it was something else, maybe some external factor that was playing a role in generating this ailment, then the doctor will advise the person to say, okay, if this particular food is causing you this suffering, this ailment, you should not eat this food. Oh, this particular external factor is the source of your suffering. So therefore, you should try to eradicate this factor from your life. Then your ailment will altogether be eradicated. So similarly, the suffering also has a source, and by understanding and identifying the source of the suffering, the cause of the suffering, one is able to eradicate the suffering altogether. This is how one is able to eradicate the suffering altogether, and thus, by understanding the suffering, to understand the cause or the origin of the suffering, and by understanding the origin of suffering, one is able to eradicate the suffering.
그래서 다 동아대 매워서야 주디 짜잖아. 동아 매워서나 아니 소야대 동아 매워서네 현자 동아대 용모도 소야게 네버트도 그랬어. 배터거나 텐데 매워 쌍마 전에 현자 용모도게 네버트 저랑 샘나 트렌토고도나 근데 트렌토게 네버들라 하네 고봤어 그래서 동아 현자 용모여가지 나를 매제가 고봤어. 다 배차잖아 나자까지라 다 매도 대 마용아 공부도 매잔데 몽골 주나 만나에서 쇠도 유지를 생도 빠져 공부 매 가실라 매전 백신들이 잡네 몽골 나자데 뺐다거나 용모도 베게 소고나는 누가 저쪽 용으로 데나시래 다 누가 되게 가르쳐서나 몽골 안에 동아째 통 말해서 오라 데데베 누가 될라 안에 꼭 봤어 숨바데
And so the third, so in some cases, so we suffer, we understand the source of the suffering, and then through practice, we're able to come to a particular point in practice where we can altogether cause the suffering to never arise. And this particular stage, by the application of which, when one is able to altogether stop suffering from arising ever, this particular stage is called cessation. This is called cessation. For instance, let's say we have many different vaccines these days, and let's say that there are some vaccines. By applying, by getting some vaccines, we're able to avoid particular disease for our entire life. So this particular vaccine is similar to the cessation, because the cessation, what it does is that it altogether stops any suffering from arising any further. So by consistent practice, being able to identify the source of suffering and eradicating them again and again, and reducing them and eradicating them again and again to the point where now the suffering doesn't arise at all. That particular stage is called cessation, and this is the third noble truth called the noble truth of cessation.
근데 내가 등하 탐제 매웠어야게 근데 누가 질라 그랬어요. 다 들려봐야나. 근데 가다 질라 그랬어. 레비야게 다티 말라 레비야 열었어. 콜라 레비야 열었어. 봐. 근데 메시 제작과 찍찍고 레이어 간데레스 저러. 어디래 그 들어 질라 명거라. 다 듣는 등하때 매웠어. 차야. 뭐 주는 맞지. 마용하게 누가티 용야라 탑람 가요 그래서. 탑람 열었다. 들라 탑람 가르서나. 근데 남지 덴바스야. 덴바지 열었어. 남지 제저랬어. 남대 안에 냠절 렘발 때네 저랑게 동안 너가 책을 했으더니다. 시바들라네 동아 고바데 터버체베 탑네 남세 저랬어. 어딜라 안에 덴바 시바데 안에 남제 덴바스 좀.
And so when we talk about this particular stage where we are able to stop suffering from ever arising, a question arises in our mind. We tend to say, okay, how should we achieve the state of cessation? Is it something that only I or only few people can attain? Can everyone attain this particular thing called cessation? And so the answer is that everyone can achieve it, but it could be achieved through a particular path of practice. And so this path through which the cessation is possible is the fourth noble truth, that is the noble truth of path.
다 근데 그 남되게 안에 냠내 잡아라 때내게 안에 동아 세베 고바토 그래서라. 다이나 때 남대 가르래서는 양 뒤버질려면 뭐라. 다 남대라 딱 간저게 다 망보 열어서 남지다. 다 된다냐 딱 간저게 탑기다 아니 시럽니 차고로다. 남대라 아니 잠바다 냥질라 쏘고 열어다 하나 저게 탑 시럽이 돈에 잡아나 돈이도 배 시럽라 쏘고 시럽 남자 근데 그 남대라 되봐야나 아니 탑다 시럽니 좋겠네. 다 탑지 찰라네 라미 받을라네 전족습니다. 냥젤라 잠바 짐발라 추림라 쏘고도 참 시럽지 차례 잡았나 시럽라 타라 먹고 시럽다. 근데 라과야 시럽다 저기 지금 또 연락 쏘고 옛날에 아니 티다 뭐 내로 가래 뭐 통계들 시럽지. 다 차베 시럽지 되네 다 동반이 또 배시를 쏘고 근데 남자 먹보죠. 어제도 잠은 냠설 내네 탑드는 냠설 남바이나 동아 세베 아니 고고서 토그레스.
Now, when we talk about the practice of the path, the question arises, what is the practice of the path? And then when we look at the path, there are many different paths that we can follow to attain the state of cessation. But if we are to comprise it in two particular terms, that would be method and wisdom. In method, the method aspect of the path, we have things such as the altruistic mind of bodhicitta, we have loving kindness, we have compassion, we have generosity, we have conduct and moral. And then when it comes to the wisdom, we have the gross wisdom, which pertains to understanding the reality of gross phenomena. And then we have the subtle wisdom, which is the wisdom pertaining emptiness. So with the union of the method and wisdom, one is with the union of the method and the wisdom, one is able to apply in that particular path. So therefore, in short, all these paths can be summarized into method and wisdom.
그래서 당한 저게 다 둥아대 뭐지 봤지? 둥아대 하는 거에 대한 반찬은 둥아대 안에 주대 세지. 다 주대 매봤어요라. 근데 고봤어요. 터버렸어. 다 대래 고바터벨라 베더 자잖아. 다 남대는 터버려라. 다 하나 지금 가서 르나나 나자이나 셈년 나자나 나자대 뭐지 전에 나자대 간에 중도 상관도 다 자지라. 나자대 진로 내다 르 나자라고 차샤바이나 먼저 나자대라 안에 내부 바라스트라고 다야나 박테리아나 간데 딱딱자 지도 아나 이제 많이 배야 나자 칠로게 데 캔슬 라이즈 여러다 딘데라 속바다 망보죠라 다데 뭐제잖아 다데 매와서야게 아니 네바야나 다 매와서야게 탑랍데 가서나 다 남제시도 다 가서 매여라 매면제 제와도 면제 제들라 다 등사 르지 나자이나 아니 칠로 샤조다라 속바다 다 등사 면제 나가 망보죠라 딘데 면제도 제와 되네 아니 탑랍데도 되네 아니 나자도 매와서고라 Denaji ta denaji sem naza se bodaya sem naza de ngode chane ta thingsa counseling se de yorata sem naza la de tapse chenge yore ta na je gom ja la so ta ta mo mo jora denje ge tap de le dene ge ne le da sem naza de me wa se jora o tablam de le dene me wa so ko na ji ta nam sha ju de ngode na la ka le da sem naza de 근데 me wa so ko de tablam de chik pa chik 좀 de ma 타르게 간저기 명하데 탑 but zaman zawan me was la tamlam de je yorda de ba shi nam sha jore so de tang wo ne je la ma de nyam se le ba ina so je na mare se la tu em.
And so, initially identifying the suffering, then identifying the source of suffering, then through the rigorous practice on the path, attaining the state of cessation. So we see that through this particular steps, one can apply oneself into the path in attaining something called the cessation, which altogether stops the cause of suffering and thus eradicating the suffering entirely. So, illustration of this is, for example, if someone, the same illustration, let's say someone is having a physical or mental ailment, let's say physical ailment first, and then because of this physical ailment, this could be caused by many different external factors such as virus and bacteria, or some people they suffer from cancer or any other factor because of which they may be suffering this physical ailment. And by identifying this the cause of this physical ailment, one is able to take different course of medication, medication, treatment, or they can go under surgery to fix that ailment. Similarly, if someone is going through a mental ailment, then they are understanding this mental ailment and taking counseling, meditation, or such, and able to stop the particular ailment from happening. So the method which is used, for example, the course of medication or counseling and meditation, such, these particular method which are used to fix the physical or mental ailment is an analogy of the path in the path of the Four Noble Truth. And thus, Buddha, after Buddha has expounded the suffering, the cause of suffering, he expounded the path for us to practice and thus to reach the cessation of the suffering. And then, if every one of us would actually and genuinely take up the practice of the Four Noble Truth in the path and try to implement them, it is a refutable truth that this does ultimately lead us to cessation.
Ta de cha da de ba chi ngo de tu do de re do ta ji da ma tha ja ba she wa ne da de je ma mo ko re ma da lam sa she to de ne yo ma re ta do do je de ne ro che de ne ana ta de ba shi ni de dang bo ni de ane de bang ja re so tor che che chi ma ni de ni ane lang ja re so den shi lang dong so den shi lang wa lang ya cha ni da tor ba cha ni so dang bo ni ane tor che che dung ga da kun ju ni lam da go ba da lam ni ane nyam so lang ja 된대게 런던에 남산 시 니스고라.
And so this is a very very brief presentation on the Four Noble Truth. If we were to discuss about the Four Noble Truth in depth, it would take us a lot of time, as it is a very vast topic. And so in the general presentation, we have the Four Noble Truth, the first two and the second two. The first two, which is the suffering and the cause of suffering, in the perspective of abandoning and adopting, these two are to be denounced or abandoned. The second two, which is cessation and the path, these two in the perspective of abandoning and adoption, these are to be adapted or adopted in our conduct.
den시게 남샤데다 좀 되게 송하게다 데 가르쳐 버려서나 최게 안에 산자게 최게다 망히도 쳐버렸어 den시 랑도 남샤데 대시 남샤데 시샤타나다 딜레파 타자와셔나다 담메다 셔버시 바셔요제 데 안에 진짜 망히도 쳐버렸다 den시 남도 왔어데 그래서 좀 되게 덴바시 총고송 드린 네 덴바시 총고송을 제 지단계 안에 좀 되게 최적으로 림바 숨송서다. 네 대시 조건대 송사대 안에 와르네세 사라나타서체. 대 안에 대관에 지금 작업 공부를 전공을 입었어. 어딘데를 쏘고 내 총거데 남자 뭐 지당 주봉 제대 시동송 제대 시동 그봐 시대 잡어대 안에 덴바식 남자한테 시샤 돈에 봐아대 남자 다랑 봐 뭐더라 돈에 쏘고 그래서
And so this teaching of the Four Noble Truths is the foundation of all the teachings of Buddha. In these Four Noble Truths comprises the 84,000 bodies of teaching of Buddha. So generally speaking, Buddha turned three wheel of Dharma, in which the first was the turning of the wheel of Dharma of the Four Noble Truths at Saranath Varanasi. And then on the foundation of the Four Noble Truths, he turned the second wheel of Dharma at the Vulture's Peak, the turning of the wheel of Dharma of non-characterization, and so forth, and then the third turning of wheel of Dharma, and so. But though he had turned he has done three turning of wheel of Dharma, the rest of this, the two of the later two, were based on the foundation of the Four Noble Truths. And similarly, all the teachings, which is of the 84,000 body of teachings of the Buddha, are all based on the foundation of the Four Noble Truths. They do not astray from the premise of the teaching of the Four Noble Truths.
이제 다 덴바치게 남샤라 퇴백다 준비되게 최근 남샤 망보시 송샤다 다 최근 남샤 망보시 송나 카시에데 망보지 송해야 된다 소소소게 놀라 삼바 간사 카시엘라다 놀 디삼보도네 딜라송 간시엘라데 안에 간사데 놀라 중국면서나 다 딜라 삼백에 맞 최근 남샤 망보 저저 송해야 돼 가르쳐내 송으로서나 그거 저거데 안에 송세 유 간사 된 적이 안에 둥아 라 트네 안에 대지엄 타바 내가 대지다 타도 안에 타바 다 탐자 있지 뭐 더베기 탑제 시시송 다잖아 강사까지라 땡 서버 쉬어 송이나 나 건저기 고마져 봐지 안데 로다제 내조 연구 그래서 나 콜라로라 올라다 딜라 강사들 대신에 삼보도 없으네 좀 되다 딜라 빠가니 쳐졌어 카시라야 다데 콜라시와나 다 되게 안에 로다도 제네야 빠도코나 냐월에 다 로다 제네 코나 출라 ninja 파샤지 내 랭가 바셔 서서는 콘돌 안에 등원에 좀 매나 디 콜로라 삼바게 쳐 어디다가 소바 남자 뭐 보셔서
And so, derived from the Four Noble Truths, Buddha did expound many different teachings. And all of these different variation of teachings were given by Buddha dependent on the one that receives the teaching, dependent on their intellectual and mental capacity. Buddha expounded different level of teaching derived from the Four Noble Truths. And this was done primarily so because if Buddha was to give a same depth of teaching, same profundity and depth of teaching to all the receiver or disciple, sometimes the very deep teachings could arise a mind because of one's inability to comprehend the true essence of those deep teaching. Some disciples, in the mind of some disciples, they would be root of wrong views. They would see those teaching as fallible and wrong. And so, in order to avoid this, Buddha has expounded the teachings in variation of levels and understanding and depth. And the very purpose of giving all these different teachings is for these disciple to start their journey on the path of attaining liberation from the suffering and complete enlightenment. So this is the reason why Buddha has expounded many variation of teaching.
다 빼도 자신의 시진도 썼죠.다 콜로니에 콘도 세고라 시진도라 차셔와 이나다 시진도 바 제어 버소나 범세죠다 셜로그 범수다 다 대저 가서 가셔라 시오 바 타제와 시오 마세와이나 시제게 도되게 된다 고마도 될라 근데 범수 될라 대제 왕보 대제 타가들라 아니 니디스나 셜로그 니디 동전 튀니서죠 어디에 송 내가 될라 대제 왕보 넣어들라 아니 대스 제동와서 동다 셜로그 동다 제서 같은 수 자, 된저야 되네. 다 될래 뭐 뭔가 같으나 실한냥 보고 쇼였나? 되게 된다 사장 코도. 다 왕보다 신도 넣거든요. 시제 너 제대로 줘도 되잖아. 시제 얘기 찍 맞어요. 아싸 얘기 줘. 라와 잠지가 아니 제도마다 봄다 실한 연구로서 뭐 죄자 창막 코트고 왕본도 어때 강사 소소 왕본을 보면 이게 최대는 남자 손으로.
So the illustration of the variation of the death of the teaching is, for instance, in the second turning of Wheel of Dharma, Buddha expounded the Pragyaparamita Sutra. So there are many different variation of Pragyaparamita Sutra. In order to introduce the Pragyaparamita Sutra to those who have a lower intellectual capacity, Buddha expounded the teaching in 100,000 verse. And then those who had much sharper and greater intellectual capacity, Buddha expounded the teaching into 20,000 verse. And those who were even more intellectually capable, Buddha expounded the teaching of Pragyaparamita Sutra into 8,000 verse. And those who were very intellectual and those who had great intellectual capacity, Buddha expounded the teaching as the Heart Sutra, Pragyaparamita Hridaya Sutra. And those who were thoroughly not only intellectually capable, but had great insight into the Pragyaparamita Sutra, Buddha expounded the entire 100,000 verse into a single syllable, which is A, the primordial sound that encapsulates the understanding and essence of the entire Pragyaparamita. So if you look at this particular layout, for those who had lower capacity, this was 100,000 verse, then to 20,000, to 80,000, to few verses in the Heart Sutra, and finally, for those who were not only intellectually capable but had great insight into the Pragyaparamita Sutra, the entire teaching was given as a single syllable of the primordial sound, the essence of Pragyaparamita, which was the syllable A.
대선에 당한 저기 존재 되게 범려서 거든요. 최망보 속성으로 다 된저 손도전에 당한 저 배바도 차샤와이나 다 미제 된저이나 다 드린 두고 세시라 두고 세시 이제 뭐때 최 부대 직도 니데다 소소 가셔 숨데 자데 니데 근데 군에다 쇼반에 손에 배 롱고 차단을 배 꼬라된다 최주 콜로콜이소라 최저 콜로콜 천대절이다. 최저 콜로콜 천대절에 다데 된저 개발 군에 다 쇼반에 내서 꼬라 잡도에 찔러 좀 다 되냐면 안에 가져져 시 타벨에서 봐. 근데 제가 녹소 열다. 근데 가서는 다좀 되게 최저 콜로콜 되게다. 천대조 인도 노래서 정은. 근데 속바이나 다 제 지고 그랬어.
So on this day, which is the this Chökhor Düchen, us Tibetan, what we do is that we will carry a single or multiple volume of teaching, such as the 100,000 verse Pragyaparamita or such, and then we will go to circumambulate the temple. And this is to symbolize that as Buddha has turned the wheel of Dharma, he is still turning the wheel of Dharma. So to symbolize that even now he's turning the wheel of Dharma, we carry either one or multiple volumes with us, and then we go to circumambulate the temples and monastery. And then after that, we would gather everyone back in Tibet, everyone in the village. They would gather at a particular ground or somewhere, and then the entire day they would spend dancing, singing, and celebrating this day, saying that Buddha has now turned the wheel of Dharma and we have received the virtue and merits.
다 대선 최저 콜로콜어서 다 건조 전대되고 된대 전에 되고 다 되네 지금 엄마들 최저 콜로콜어서는 콜어서 돼 안에 강사 찍네 찍 똑바로 봐 찍을 봐도 꼴네 봐 요도 저라 꼴봤어 최저 콜로콜어서 되는 최저 콜로 다 최저 된다든지 막 찍을지 가다 찍는 만 되네 마셔도라 된들래야 안에 최저 콜로콜어서 된다도 고
And though this is a very gross symbolism of turning of wheel of Dharma, the actual meaning of the turning of wheel of Dharma is to pass on the understanding of the sutra from one person to another. And so the transmission of the teaching from a person to a person is the actual meaning of turning of wheel of Dharma.
대선은 당한 적에다 안에 드린 게 안에 두 번째 되제 재화전들 안에 건적에다 좀 되게 쳐 안에 덴바시 총고데 안에 모두 또또지 총어래 안에 딘데게 안에 고압 총에 된 건도 상만에 손남 랍cham부 사이러스 다데 사야 대한 소소게 안에 대왕하면 레다 아물람다 딘데 왕게 안에 가도 돼 좀네 안에 춘이 제고 총레스 대 안에 항상이다. 개발상 보니 되는 도스.
So, therefore, on this auspicious day of the fourth day of the sixth lunar month, the day of the turning of Wheel of Dharma, every one of us who have participated for this event, we have been able to listen to the teachings that is of the Four Noble Truth. And Geshe said that he felt that being able to participate and be a part of such event on this auspicious day symbolizes that he himself and all of us gathered here have in past accumulated great merit, and by participating we have accumulated a great amount of merit.
안데서나 땅에 빠져 대대고 세 빠져 뒤와되는 연나. 뒤와 가셔야 되는 데도 도스야. 대대대 뒤와 연나. 뒤와 매와는 같은 것도 에도 가셔야 하나 섬스.
So Geshe said that so this is it in regarding to the Four Noble Truth, and he said that now if anyone has question regarding the topic that we have discussed today, they may ask question, and if they have question, they may ask question. If not, he will speak a little bit more.
어제다 뒤와 매서라. 좀도 땅 저기 안에 덴바시게 남자 송대줘라. 덴바시게 남자 송에 땅 저기 당보거라 안에 동아시아 봤어요. 최고 송도. 다 대인에서는 안 저기 땅 남자 진도 소속에 메제 나로라. 근데 강아 가래 바지 당보대니 강아데 차 상치 무지체 버렸어. 무지체도 뺏겠지 버렸어. 르그 나자 이날에 다차 잠자는 건 저기 르 나로라 답변아 로자와이나 로자그라다 삼산 로자되잖아 가서는 나로도 즉 독스 걸다. 다도 어떤 거다. 로드와이나 지나야 강아지도 우스 다된 거라. 내내 집 값은 건 저기 아니 오다 나로 직도 와 직. 왕보도 와 직견도 요사래 삼상의 소소 하고네. 근데 가라이메 다제체도 계속 버려도. 당연히 제가 tham gia 속바 사브라시 온라인에 속바다. 데데델 속바게 다 뭐서 먼저 뇽되게 내좀 망보지 요래다. 대저 렉도 통도잖아요. 테크놀로도 와 지금 연구 있어야 삼매치. 나 tham gia 속바도 부도로 속바다. 맨 망고 대용해 줘라. 네 가르쳐서는 나로도 와 지금 독서에다 다도 어떤 거. 다당도잖아요. 내가 저기 나로라 엄마데 네 강한테 가림바데 하코에 개접을. 제제네 네 제마저저 야매 당샤나 니마제 나다데 삽심부차네 네 삽심부차와이나 가르쳐와서나 땅아도 맹간도라 맹간도나네 내단 세도잖아요 에 강한 뭐시오지 셈나다데 예와라다 나다 강아요 스나다 요래 당한나 생 태바 도선라 속바다 뭐시오지 차대오라 소 내가 최근에 내가 지금 들었어 대전에 강한 뭐시오지 고조용 거라 대 고마도 응을라 당번에 내 되게 다져도 나거든요 너서저게 다들 빠져 달랜드 문제잖아 다들 가르쳐고도 하자에 제고도 뺏겨 버렸어.
And so, in the understanding of the Four Noble Truth, Buddha said, understand the suffering. And he has done so for us to understand that we suffer in our day-to-day life. And understanding the suffering, we are able to eradicate it by understanding the source of suffering. For example, in our day-to-day life, we face many different types of problems, and we come across many different types of difficulties in our life. And when we are met with a particular problem, the first step should be understanding and analyzing that problem. And through analyzing this problem, we can understand what steps should we take in order to solve this particular problem. And then if, for example, if we are having a particular ailment in our body, let's say we are coughing too much, it is a sign that tells us that there is something wrong with our lungs. And so we should so the doctor should thoroughly examine our lungs in order to identify the problem and thus eradicate that problem. For example, if we are feeling itchy at a particular part of body, it is saying that there's something inside our body that is causing this itch. So the doctor should determine what is the cause and eradicate that problem. Similarly, if we have bumps or pimples on our skin, it is indicating that we have some problem in our skin, under our skin. So the doctor should determine what's the problem under the skin and try to eradicate that. So therefore, understanding the source of the suffering, we are better equipped to solve these problems in our lives. And it's by the thorough examination of the nature of the suffering, we are much better equipped to solve the particular problem. Geshe la del chuoji kusha.
그래서
So Aditya Arunla asks, how to know which of the Buddha's teaching is suitable for us as per our intellectual capacities. Laso Geshe-la tanda Aditya Arunla kungi kasong shalana ngarang chögi tata kamda mebal tebe ani ngarang chögi logi ta lotop ta nga chu kamda mebal tebe ngarang chögi tade chala ani 상계기 nga 저기 최송바드 난 간디 nga 절 참다 마참라디 nga 저 따지 간데 쳐고랬어 nga 최된데지 참바도 최딩의 고사래라지다 딩얘기 딩얘기 남주야 당얘기 로톱기 nga 저기 당바지 도스라지 딩 nga 저기 간데지 따지 쳐고랬어라지
단다 에티야
아룬라
에티야
아디트야 아룬라
에티야 소티가라게 가르쳐 되바데 야고시고도 되바 다데 지단게 산자의 최대 가르쳐 한번도 없었는데 다 담보데 파조 밑에 남사고라 다 저랑 삼셔도 데려도 없어야지 아주 또 뒤바지게 남사 라하고 또 그래서 가잖아 강사되게 왕배 내제도 뭐 된제도 버지 칼라간다 약고 하고 직접 제네다 캐제셔도 약셔도 버지 가르쳐나 소소 담보 산자의 저 남자 로로지 저도 전에 다 딘나네게 아니고 다디 로로지 장이나 딘나네 다 디데 딜로서 말라 참부도 삼상의 소속의 뭐는 여bat제도 그래 지단 것도 차샤바나 다 산자의 추노로 제토보들 남자 맞아 시제게다 덤바시 남자라 속바다 다한나 신게 네 레준데라 속바다 남자라 속바 다한나 신게 로종다 아니 전적 섬라 속고 된적의 종당 남자줘라 된저로 장다바나 칼리칼리라는 소속고 다디 안에 가라 참부도 사상의 소속원에게 아니 여bat지 그랬어 내 약속도 통도
So Geshe-la said that, Aditya Arunla, your question is wonderful. He said that for a normal person who is not a Buddha, for a normal person to tell someone else or suggest someone else for a suitable practice or suitable level of teaching is something that is quite impossible for them to do. Because in order to suggest them anything, the first thing that the other person should have is the ability to comprehend the intellectual capacity and the mental capacity of the other person, and to thoroughly understand their mind. Only after thoroughly understanding the mind of the other person, then only can they suggest any teaching which is suitable for them. So the initial step that one can do is that initially a person could apply themselves in the study of the foundation and the basics of Buddhism. For example, the Four Noble Truths, the law of causality, or the mind training. And by applying oneself in the studies of these fields, then one can eventually build their sort of like path or their sort of inventory of teachings that are suitable for that are suitable for them to practice. So it's only after analyzing the teachings that they have studied, they can further plan of different teachings that they could adopt in their life and the teachings that they feel are suitable for them.
대체 너 가셔야한테 코가 보셔 코가 보전 되게 안에 대가 된다 날랜다 개방되는 뭔가 소송을 배차잖아다 준죽도거든요 준죽도거든요 안에 갈라간다는 로트 보이나 가셔 타고요 가셔 그때 보셔 그때 보면서다 최 캘렌면 맞다 남바 이메일 맞다 수이나 그 냠제 렌트베게 딘데게 남자 망보셔 대체 대대 장샤나 야보여
Some of the sutras that Buddha has expounded are quite complex, and the concept that are taught are very complex and difficult to comprehend. So in those cases, what one can do is that one can take refuge in reading the commentaries by the great scholars and masters of Nalanda. So many masters of Nalanda have authored many commentaries on these sutras. For example, the Bodhisattva Charya Avatara uh, by Shantideva. This is a profound text which can be read and practiced as a mind training, and also these type of texts are such which can be applied irrelevant of someone identifying themselves as a Buddhist or not. So there are mind training of such which also a non-Buddhist person could apply in their day-to-day life. So one can first start by diving in those particular type of texts.
다 너저도 차셔는 다 배제 다시 냠제서 셔라 다다신도 제자고 사와 담바 제와셔서 주주나라 수고라 너저도 차셔는 근데 다시 냠제 거네 네 삼선다에 저라 전축선로서 봐 다시 냠제서 봐나 근데 소소 데레 메제게 안에 직접 시험을서 봐 메시게 냠제 시험을서 봐잖아 용화 용거도나 내가 용화는 제일 용거다 세대야 아니 용화도 봐 메도 봐다 대화도 간사 직송으로 했어 냠바레스 냠바임바 손자 말아 대잖아 누가 들에 잡아나 셈 맞지 봐요. 셈라 중앙 용어도 다 네게 메시발을 잡아야냐. 표절에 다가라 용거래다. 가서나 마다 메시반이데 찍고도 좀 메임 찍고래. 중앙 먹고 왔다 대화 거 찍고래. 어디에 지주민도 다 삼야게 삼로데 코로 용거래. 대수나 덴제를 대대 대라 속바게 아니 냠내 먹고 싶어져. 덴제 고주네 차샤나 되고.
And then there are these practices such as equal exchange of self and others, to be able to put oneself into the shoe of someone else. For instance, if someone utters a harsh word to oneself, at that moment one experiences a great deal of suffering. By experiencing that suffering, one should remind themselves that since I have suffered because of that particular action, everyone else is same as I. They too will feel suffering if I utter harsh word to them. They too will suffer if I do an action that causes suffering to them. And so therefore, I shall refrain myself from doing these actions because all mother sentient beings are the same. Everyone desires for happiness. Everyone avoids suffering. And because everyone avoids suffering and desires happiness, it is the same as I, and therefore I shall never engage in an action that would cause someone else of the same degree of suffering. So therefore, by applying to these type of fundamental practices, one can try and ascertain what teaching is suitable for them. 아니 Geshe Latanda nga tseki alkalai nga tsu chua kusha. So Dr. Alkala says, what are the root causes of suffering taught by Buddha? Alkala kongi kasmo shala na nga tseki ani chumne negi nga tseki donga gi nga tseki tsawe gyu khari res la tsawe gyu khari res tsawe gyu 강이 ime 강송 요레슬라지 nga 저기 동아 셰바티기 tsawe gyu di khari reslaji de khari song yoreslaji di geje tisha
네, 다 대제 가지고 건도 쉬어 봐. 등아 쉬어자. 대 등아기 조딩 거죠. 뭐 군중 송라. 군중 송라 안에 레다 녀모니 있어. 다 녀모들라야 안에 녀모 몸 남자 먹고 싶었어. 다 된다나게 녀모 봐 뒤바이나 마 특숨 송라. 특숨디 나나게 뒤 나나게 잡았대 안에 머리 빠르스. 다 너드는 쉬어야나 등아 탐자의 중세 잡았대 안에 머리 빠세 되랬어. 어디 좀 되대서.
So in the Noble Truth, the Four Noble Truth, after Buddha said, understand the suffering, the Buddha said, after understanding thoroughly what is suffering and that one is experiencing suffering, then ascertain what is the origin of the suffering. And so in the origin of the suffering, Buddha said the origin of suffering is the chain of karma, and the affliction. So when we talk about affliction, there are many different types of affliction, but there are three main afflictions. And out of the three main afflictions, the one that is the root of all affliction is the ignorance. So therefore, it is the chain of karmas and the ignorance, non-virtuous karma and ignorance, which leads one to suffer. So therefore, the root cause of suffering is the karma, the chain of karma, and the ignorance.
말에 다 독숨시라다 되자시다 띠무숨데 날로다 띠무숨다 독숨나나 되자시다나서 보다 레게 안에 남에도 차장 종사데 네 데레스 마릭바레스 마릭바 때네게 네 레사 레데 때네 동안나서 뭐 전용 거로 다 종사 너도 시원 독숨 되자시다 띠무 된저 띠무 되자 시다 띠무숨 나나게 되자다 네 시다니 되냐 띠무네 총레스 어디에서 나다 짜와대 동아게 중공 그 짜와대 근데 메릭 받으레스 메릭 받아 매와 소톰나 아니 동아 탐자게 고가와레스.
And so, therefore, when we look into the three afflictions, the hatred, the attachment, and the ignorance, we come to the conclusion that both the hatred and attachment arises from the ignorance. So therefore, the cause of the affliction and cause of all suffering is the affliction. So therefore, the attachment, the hatred, and the ignorance is the cause of all the cause of all suffering, and in that, the ignorance is the root of all affliction, and thus, ignorance is the root of all suffering.
대체 아니 다 단장 가져 드리는데 다 마셔 골라다 에디줘라 뜸바게 생아줘라 네 안에 탱숨 정하죠 냠보트 사이언스
So
대조
before we end today's session, we're going to recite the mantra of Buddha Shakyamuni 3 times.
어때서나 당한 저기 덤바게 생아데 숨사바 가서 다 좀바 좀 되대 거서 유 삼바 데레터네 아니 좀바 좀 되대 최지 본부 제대 시도는 써고 된 적에 아네 송대 거서 전도 삼바다고 다 하나 좀좀 되대 뒤에 소소라네 논다 똑바 연대도 근데 총수를 소소라 톱수 300에 근데 몇 받아 제베고 나는 가도 돼 생각도 송아이스.
So when we are going to recite the mantra of Buddha Shakyamuni, visualize as such that actual Buddha is appearing in front of you, and from this image or visualization of Buddha, Buddha is expounding the 84,000 teachings of the bodies of teaching, and that you are under it receiving this blessing as you recite this mantra in cycle. And Geshe Lobsang 저기 the alkala 저기 the what chuaji kusha. So alkala asks, what is way to remove suffering? 아니 alkala 콩 가송샬나 nga 저기 다 덴제기 nga 저 동아디 짜와 니네 nga 저 매바 쇠발라 당아 저기 람디 다 탑시디 카리 요레스.
다 대체 건도 씨가 다 하나데 완전 람냠네 저거랬어. 람여라. 람들라는데 산조 섭되는 섭보다. 아네 람과 숨정하는 섭고 남샤 먹고 효승으로다. 다 뒤에 봐 되는 저거는 대체 건도 씨가 이제 탑다 시람니 스되니. 아네 냠술렘베터네 아네 대체 거랬어. 다 내도 찾아 맞으셔야 되는 대체 쉬고 그랬어. 저번에 람세들라네 람과 숨정하셔야 저래. 다네 제가 아네 산조 섭되는 섭보다. 딘데게 다 남남샤 먹고 쇼송. 딘데데 저거데 아니 탑다 셔라 뉴스도다. 데데 냠슬레네 때 마티 동아 잡아 메가서레스.
So therefore, there are the 37 path of enlightenment towards enlightenment, and there are these other path which are in the fivefold, threefold, and the 15-fold such, which enables one to remove the suffering. So so right now we cannot dive into each of those paths, but there are many different paths that the Buddhists expounded, by the practice of which one can remove or eradicate the suffering.
맞아. 근데 또 몇생한테 저러대 저 네가 어떤 것도
Uh,
근데
Geshe-la
성화
tantang nga zo
세대 나
la Geshe la tanda alga la kongka songso la ngazo pala miela gen dagaran roba songso lam nanglo.
팔라 연락 제요. 팔라 연락 제던도 야 아다 디나라 추투고 팔라 연락 제던도 요래 다 도도 팔라 연락 제던도 남가 나나 팔라 연락 제 추투고 봐.
So Geshe-la said that yes, the eightfold path, the Arya Ashtanga mark, this is also one of the path, and this eightfold path comes under the fivefold path. So this is also a path which one can practice in order to remove suffering or eradicate the suffering entirely.
그래서 아니 다시 건너 주면 이제 다 타가 도제 줘라. 대조라 덤바게 생각돼. 아니 땡솜지 줘니. 대조가 가서 다 덤바 좀 되다네. 알아 아니 대화도 몇 봐. 대해서 덤바 좀 되다게다. 센다. 배달해서 연대된 적이 아니 조서줄라 아니 진행이 질랍단선 쭉수 삼상 몇 받았던 벽은 아니 건조대. 맞대 했을
So before we recite the mantra of Lord Shakyamuni, so we see that there is this initial verse, Tapke Tukje, and as you recite this verse, visualize that you are receiving the blessing of the Buddha, and it's entering in you, thoroughly purifying you. So therefore, visualize supplication and purification with this particular verse, and after that, we are going to do three recitation of the mantra. 아니 딩을라 계실라탄다 알깔라 콩카송실나 나가제 람가 셰바디 카르레라 티시 게제시티샤.
알레 람가 되다 제단게 졸람 돈람 곰람 멜로블람 세지. 디치스 레버스.
So the five path is the general presentation of the five path in the path and the grounds, the dasa in the dasa bhumi and the five path. The five path, the first one is the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of contemplation or meditation, and then finally the path of no more learning. So these are the five path.
그래서 안다네디 백가나라 송으로 나버디레스. 인지나라 타겟도 제 저라식데.
So we're going to recite this in Tibetan. So you can see the Latin transcription here in the bold letters font here. So you can read the Latin transcription down here and recite it in Tibetan.
그래서 오다게 도제 사제레소 신제메도 되제 본조에바 세제레보에 지베구 오샤제자고 제라에사제로 모네 마에모네예소하 모네 마에모네예소하 모네 마에모네소
아니 게실라 단다 알칼라 콩칸소 찰라나 제망가 저 초대지 총스나 안데도 저 람가디 간라 테스트 케션나로 제송샤.
라라슬라스 정마다 어쩌라나 되고라 쇼초 그랬는데
So Geshe-la said that next time, if next time when he has time, we can have a session in which he will explain more in detail about the fivefold path.
그래서 안다들이 안에 되게 제가 제대로 당한 적에서 chuyên nghiệp sẽ đến đây cái tổ chức công học chung 보초나서 담만념 주나서 제수 이런 쉬 당한 제수 이런 쉬 맞아 당한 저 들에 네 개발 랍션 뭐 쉬었어요 랍션 뭐 싸봤던서 네 도장도 네 뭐에 때 캐치 뭐래 어디선다 다 들에 네 개발 랍션 뭐 싸봐 개발 싸봤대 네 메뉴 나가다다니 심제 탐자 동화다 아 대화다 대화다 때마 들라 쏙 봐요다 심제 탐자 저는 뉴도 아니 맨날 냐데 아니 컴바터에 주로 들어가쇼 세고 되게 아니 this ngoba narana show.
So, on this auspicious day, we have done the teaching and listening of the Dharma on the Four Noble Truth, and therefore we have undeniably accumulated great merits. And because of this accumulation of the great merits, we should dedicate it thoroughly. And Geshe said that every one of us who have taken time and participated in this event, this has become a very virtuous and meritorious event that we have participated in. And so he rejoices in the merits accumulated by every participant in today's event, and he also rejoices in their willingness to join for today's event. And so, therefore, all the vast virtue and merit that is accumulated today, one should dedicate it for the complete enlightenment of oneself and the sentient beings, and then thoroughly dedicate it for the immeasurable, the countless sentient being as the boundless sky, and dedicated for the liberation of these sentient beings from the suffering, and may all of them be delivered by this merit, may all of them be delivered to the perfect manifestation of complete enlightenment of parinirvana.
Okay. Okay, I would like to say thank you so much, Tenzin Lakpala, for your wonderful translation and Minal moderating today's session. And all of you, I'm very, I very appreciated all of you to attend this session. Okay, thank you. Now I dedication prayer.
And thank you to you too, Geshe-la, for the precious teachings. I'll share my screen. Give me a moment. I hope you are able to see my screen now. Well, you can see the screen now, right? Okay. Let us do the dedication prayer from Shantideva's way of the Bodhisattva. May all beings everywhere, plagued by suffering of body and mind, obtain a notion of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or even fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvest. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Thank you everyone. Thank you. Yeah, maybe all of you like to unmute and say thank you to Geshe-la. You can do that. Thank you, Venerable Geshe, everybody.
Thank you, Venerable Geshe.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you, Geshe.
Chana Kishla, Katin Chair, Teacher Chair. Thank you, Tenzin Lakpala. Thank you, all the organizing team. Thank you, everyone.
Everyone.